It is doing the loading screen, and then we will be good to go. All right, we are live.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for keeping us updated on the progress. Time seems to go extra slow when we're just staring at each other on these boxes. But good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 16, 2026 meeting of the Maryland Commission on Hate Crime Response and Prevention. My name is Zanita Wickham-Hurley. I'm a Deputy Attorney General in the Maryland Office of the Attorney General, and I'll be chairing the meeting today on behalf of Attorney General Brown. I'm glad we're having a chance to come together, and especially that we scheduled to be virtual today in light of the forecast. As I said, I hope everyone is safe and hope that the weather holds off and allows us to have this technology continue to serve us so that we can have exchange updates and hear about the work that has been done and the work that is to come. Thank you for continuing to meet in your committee meetings. I've been hearing from Jennifer that you all continue to work hard, and that is excellent and, of course, expected because we all know that we're continuing to see a rising amount of hate occurring across the country and our state. I think we talked about this the last time we met, that while the latest annual report showed a decrease of incidents of hate between 2023 and 2024, the numbers remain disturbingly high, and they really do need to be understood in context because in 2023, Maryland saw a 103% rise in reports compared to the year before. So even a minor decrease in 2024 shows a sustained increase across the board that we have not seen before. And even with all of that, we know that those statistics are likely an undercount of what is actually happening out there. We know that hate groups continue to be emboldened by federal administration policies, and we expect the trend of increased hate activity, unfortunately, to continue. And that's one of the reasons our work, yours as the Commission, the Attorney General, and all of our partners has never been more important. Victims of hate deserve a place where reporting feels like it will actually make a difference, and we are working hard to build that. And while many Marylanders are understandably concerned that federal hate crimes and anti-discrimination laws will no longer be enforced by the federal administration, I want to be clear. The Maryland Office of the Attorney General remains fully committed to protecting the rights of every Marylander, regardless of what's happening in Washington, and whether that's through litigation, resource development, and advocacy. We're here, and we're not going anywhere. And of course, the Commission on Hate Crime Response and Prevention continues to play an essential role in this work. This year, commissioners have kept up, as I mentioned, with their committee work. You've submitted written testimony and appeared in person to testify in Annapolis, and that advocacy matters. Thank you. The committee meetings are one of our most important tools. They meet more frequently than our quarterly meetings, and that's where a lot of the substantive details of the proposals that we develop happens. Today, we're going to talk about the work that you've been doing through the committees and what is ahead for 2026. I also want to thank all of you for your continued support of the work that our office is doing through the DOJ, Department of Justice grant that we received several years ago. That grant has now been extended through September of this year, so September 30th, 2026. As we approach the end of the grant period, we do remain focused on completing the series of regional hate bias forums across the state that we host in partnership with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. I don't know if they are here today, but I certainly want to thank them for their partnership in the forums, as well as those of you who have attended the forums and participated on panels. We really appreciate your support. Our goal with the forums is to bring together community leaders, law enforcement, and constituents to talk honestly about how to combat hate activity in each of the local regions. After our next forum, which is going to be in May in the Mid and Upper Eastern Shore, we will have hosted forums in every region in Maryland, and that is a real milestone. And again, thanks to all of you who helped to make that happen. The lessons we've learned from these forums continue to inform how we develop strategies and policies within state agencies and communities. In terms of grant-funded initiatives, we've also been working with our partners at the Maryland State Police and their vendor X is Possible to develop an online hate crimes training platform for law enforcement. We are hopefully nearing the end of that process, and once we get approval from the Department of Justice, our plan is to submit it to the Police Training and Standards Commission, and hopefully that occurs in the next couple of months. So with your help, although the grant is winding down, we do believe we've built a strong foundation over the past few years, and we're eager to keep building upon it. So even with the challenges in terms of what's coming out of Washington, D.C. and the increased hate activity, this is an exciting time for the commission. We feel that there's real momentum to build upon. Our second annual report laid out important work that we've already done and set a clear agenda for what comes next this year. Thanks to those of you who contributed to that annual report and the reviewing and the developing the content for that. I do want to take a moment to talk about where we landed this legislative session and where we are headed. This session, as hopefully all of you know, we introduced House Bill 513, which would have established Maryland's first statutory definition of a hate bias incident and updated the definition of sexual orientation in our hate crimes statutes. And we were encouraged by the support it generated, but ultimately working with the sponsor, we did decide to withdraw the bill this session. I mean, part of the challenge we face this year is structural because the bill, as drafted, maintained the mandatory reporting obligation for law enforcement for not just crimes, but for hate bias incidents. And I think many of us understand this to be the current state of the law, but I think separating out and clarifying that definition only heightened the concern that some had, some shared by members of our commission, about whether it is the right approach for law enforcement to have a mandatory reporting requirement for non-criminal activity. And so I think many of you know that we have been working on another solution for non-criminal activity, one that we feel is more practical and will better support victims of hate bias incidents. And so our plan going into next session is to pair the definition that we all developed for hate bias incidents with a meaningful solution on where those incidents should be reported. We believe, as we've discussed, that those reports should be made to a non-law enforcement entity like a 211 Maryland, and that we may make the reporting requirement for law enforcement for these types of incidents permissive rather than mandatory. And that approach, I think, would help address some of the concerns that we heard from law enforcement with House Bill 513. And also address the bigger issue of making sure that victims of all hate activity have a real pathway to get support from state or other entities, regardless of where you are in the state. And so we're going to be sharing more on this framework as we develop it. Obviously, we want your input. We want to make sure that we develop a consensus, as we do with all of our recommendations, on the best way to address victims of both hate crimes and hate bias incidents and provide the clarity that the community is looking for in terms of the difference between the two and how the community is obligated and should respond to both, because they can both be quite terrifying and obviously add to a lack of safety and security in our various communities. So this also brings me to something else I wanted to share with you. One of our priorities is making sure that we hear from each of you as we develop and refine our proposals. And so it's so important that we hear from you as soon as possible, and hopefully not after we've already developed consensus in terms of a recommendation. And so that means we really want your input as we meet in our committees and when we come together in these quarterly commission meetings, so that by the time we are pushing recommendations out through our annual report or through proposed legislation, we know what, if any, concerns you have. We have had an opportunity to weigh and incorporate your input. And so when we are meeting with policymakers, we are working in lockstep. And so we can then count on our commissioners to do anything from meet with the legislators and other policymakers to advocate in support of our proposals, testify before legislative committees, and otherwise help to respond to any concerns that are raised. While OAG may chair this commission, we believe strongly that your voice is not secondary to our offices, and we want you to be front and center working alongside us as we work to advance the recommendations that you all develop. Finally, I do want to applaud all of you for showing up and continuing to show up and do this difficult work. As I said, hate activity is a serious threat to our society, and it is a threat to a society that values diversity and the contributions of all of its members. The work of this commission is vital and urgent. I want to take a moment to welcome our new commissioners, and I think I saw a few names of our new commissioners on the call today. Jennifer, help me out, because now the names have moved since I last looked as people have joined. So who can we give our new commissioners an opportunity to introduce themselves?
Right. So I see Laomi is here.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Let me try to get my camera to work. Hi, good afternoon. Like what Jennifer said, my name is Laomi Adebenro. I'm Maryland's Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator, and I work for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. Nice to see you all today.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. And then Lori is also here.
Hi, good afternoon. This is my first meeting, so I'm very excited to be here with you all. My name is Lori Benner. I am the Associate Vice President of Housing and Community Development for the National Fair Housing Alliance. We are a civil rights nonprofit organization dedicated to eliminating discrimination in housing.
Thank you, Lori, and welcome. And then I believe our third new commissioner is from the Maryland Center for School Safety, but is not able to join us today. And so
I believe Kate Bryan is on the call, but Kim Buckheit is. I was going to say, please correct me if I've got the wrong KB on this call.
No, Kate Bryan is on, but Kim Buckheit is actually supporting one of our school systems today, so she couldn't be here.
Thank you, Kate, for joining on behalf of the Center for School Safety. Welcome to all the new commissioners. We also have a few commissioners who have been with us but are going through the Senate approval process again. Many of you hopefully know that for our public appointees, about half of our appointees have to be approved by the Senate, and with staggered terms, that means some of you may see the Senate process a little bit more frequently, at least at the outset, until we get into a good rhythm there. So thank you for your patience with that process. We don't expect there to be any issues with those approvals, and so we'll have those, hopefully, that information from the Senate any day now. But lastly, I just want to, again, create a context for the conversation that we're going to have today in terms of the focus for the next 6 months. And as I mentioned, with hate activity continuing to be a serious threat to the safety of our communities, I do want to urge you all to come to the table over the next 6 months, particularly in your committee meetings, and give us your best thinking. We do believe that the recommendations that the commission puts forward carry real weight with the legislature, with our policymakers, and the communities that they serve. You should know that Attorney General Brown was meeting with the various specialty caucuses this session and speaking about the work of the commission and advocating on behalf of the recommendations. And so, the legislators in those caucuses very much want to help advance the recommendations that we identify as helping to really move the ball in terms of combating hate activity. And so, we're going to do what we can to provide you with the data and the experts to be able to help you generate the ideas or borrow from the best practices within your communities and the local organizations and local law enforcement agencies so that we can push those best practices out statewide. We were brought here to make a difference, and, we really need to take the opportunity to do that. And so thank you for joining us again here today. Looking forward to hearing more about what you have been working on over the past 6 months and what you are committed to working more on over the next 6 months, with the hope that we can develop recommendations together that we can stand behind when we issue our next report and are before the General Assembly next session. And so with that, I will turn things over to Jennifer for a deeper dive into where we are and where we're headed. Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you. So before I open my PowerPoint to get us through what the committees have been working on and what we see as the roadmap for this year, is that I did want to expand a little bit on the conversation about looking to other reporting mechanisms outside of law enforcement, is that we are working to identify grant funding and a test pilot for that so that we can have proof of concept when we go before the legislator to talk more about this. So that work continues actively, and I'm very excited to see it move forward. Now, I'm going to see how well I can share my screen.
Jennifer, while you're doing that, I just posed to commissioners, do folks have any concerns about the general principle that hate bias incidents or essentially non-criminal hate activity is better suited in being reported to someone other than law enforcement? And we've had a lot of conversations, but I just want to make sure that there are no concerns about that strategy.
I have no concerns about the first of all, hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm a Frimpong, I'm the legal director at CASA. I definitely don't have concerns with that. And I mean, it just, based on the conversations that we've had already, right? And kind of the concerns and input that have been shared, it really just seems to be the better route, right, for non-criminal activities to be not to be reported to law enforcement, right? Especially if there's no clear clarity, right, as to, okay, well, what should law enforcement do with that information once they receive it, right? And so they receive the information and say, oh, actually, we can't do anything about it. We only respond to criminal offenses, right? So absolutely need to house that reporting mechanism elsewhere.
I appreciate that. And we'll have more conversations about where, these reports can be made. We're obviously looking for a statewide entity, and so that there's consistency across the state. We know that some jurisdictions have local human rights or civil rights agencies that already receive some of these reports, but not every jurisdiction does. So that we are working to identify a pathway that could be more responsive, where victims would be able to feel that they were provided resources consistently when they report these crimes. So stay tuned for more on that. I mean, I think we have a little bit more work to do there, but it is an item that is urgent for us in terms of helping to provide clarity and support for all victims. Did I see something in the chat that also addressed this point?
Yes, Michael said, although I don't know about the volume of reporting you'll get if it's to entities other than law enforcement, I do think you'll get more accurate reporting and data collection if it's to non-law enforcement entities.
Okay. And Laurie, is your hand up?
It is. I just wanted to know if perhaps you could make a quick point of clarification on this in terms of, we're referring to these instances as hate crimes, but then we're talking about removing some of these mechanisms away from police because they're not criminal. There's a little disconnect for me in that.
Oh, that's a great question. And there's a lot of confusion in the community around what is a hate crime versus what is a hate bias incident. And so when we're talking about, and sometimes we may unintentionally conflate the terminology, but we are working to educate the community on the difference between a hate crime, which is a action that or behavior that is a crime under Maryland law that is motivated by bias against a protected class versus activity or behavior that is otherwise not criminal in nature, but is still motivated by hate or bias against a protected class. And so typically what we refer to are slurs against a protected class, which constitutes in most instances protected speech, lawful, unfortunately, for better for worse, protected speech that is not criminal in nature. And so when someone, but certainly can feel very threatening, right? And so now we would recommend that in either instance, whether it is criminal harassment or simply a slur that is not criminal, that we recommend that those victims call law enforcement, call 911. The officer shows up to the scene. If they ultimately determine that the behavior alleged, even if true, is not criminal, then they take a report. They are supposed to take a report, but they often say, that's all we are able to do. We can't do anything else. And if they're in a jurisdiction that has other resources, then hopefully they do send those victims on. They connect them with other resources in the community to support them in navigating, moving through that experience. And particularly because a number of times the perpetrator of these incidents may be neighbors or other community members. And so how do people work together, move forward, and learn about the harms of this behavior? So we're looking to, hopefully, did that answer your question, Laurie, about the differences?
That's very helpful, that context. Thank you.
And I'll say the statute doesn't distinguish, it doesn't define crime versus incident, though it uses the language incident, and it's created confusion in the community. And so we are attempting to put in statute the definition that the commission came up with, that we agreed upon to define a hate bias incident as distinct from a hate crime. And all of that detail is in our most recent annual report. So hopefully you have an opportunity to review that and digest that. And please feel free to ask any follow-up questions if you have them. Was there anything else in terms of hands or chat, Jennifer, that you see?
Not currently, no.
Okay, all right, take it away.
Awesome. So y'all should be able to see my screen. I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna go through some committee updates. Then I will, between the committee updates and the next part, pause and let all of the commissioners have a chance to add their input in case I missed anything, in case you want to expand on something that the committees are focusing on. And then we will go into a goal we have this year is about learning from others who are combating hate so that we can better form commission recommendations in the future, as well as generate new ideas and hear about the awesome work that other places and local communities are doing already. And then there will be a chance to further expand on this with discussion, questions, ideas, and such. So for the committee updates, I'm going to go through in alphabetical order of the committees. For addressing hate in schools, we have been looking to the anti-bias training guidance to see where we can offer additional recommendations. The Maryland State Department of Education created this document after a bill passed where schools are required to provide a certain anti-bias training that focuses on different areas, and we want to make sure that that it covers everything that's needed so that the schools are as prepared as possible for when an incident of hate bias does occur, and so that they can help their communities respond and heal from that afterwards. Especially as we are talking about children, making sure that they are prepared for the future and interacting with others and understanding what exactly it means when an incident of hate bias occurs, and why that's harmful to others. We're also assessing how the commission can further assist schools in recognizing hate and what specifically needs to be reported and how. Who do you need to talk to? How does this reporting work? And how can you make sure that you are best serving your school and your students in addressing incidents of hate? And we are also hoping to work with current students through potentially the Maryland Student Council Association to understand their needs and what they would like to see. The students are the folks on the ground that are going to be the most aware of what their classmates are doing. And we hope to be able to work with them in the future to see what they actually see in their day-to-day lives and what they see as useful and working in addressing hate amongst their peers. The Community Engagement Committee continues to work on its community resource tree, which has grown very large very quickly. We have a lot of great resources available in Maryland. We hope to split these up by county, as well as different services that they offer. And then they are slowly preparing for how we plan to share new reporting mechanisms with the public when it's time. So that is on their radar specifically as the folks that are most likely to interact with the community in sharing those recommendations, and then how the whole commission can play the role in making sure that information is available for all of Maryland. The Law Enforcement Committee continues to work on making a recommendation around preventing individuals involved with extremist hate groups from being in law enforcement, while also ensuring that it respects the First Amendment rights of law enforcement officials. So that is a careful balance to tread. We're looking to examples of legislation that has been passed in other states and other jurisdictions, as well as what has been proposed in the past, to see what can be developed there in ensuring that our law enforcement is prepared to protect everybody that they serve, recognizing that that is always their goal and their priority. The Online and Cyberbullying Committee has been working on a one-pager on addressing and reporting online hate. So how to handle your online presence, how to make sure that your online activities benefit you most rather than being a place that feels unsafe, and also what to do when something happens. Sadly, people feel that they can say whatever they please on the internet because there's a screen between them and the other person. And we want to make sure that if hate occurs to somebody online, they know how to handle that, with everything from reporting to the platform to when do you need to involve law enforcement? When do you need to talk to somebody else? What are your resources when hate occurs online? And how might that show up a little bit differently in an online space rather than in person? Because either way, it does have real life consequences. And then the Online and Cyberbullying Committee is also looking at identifying a curriculum for students to understand how to recognize and better handle online hate. So helping students prepare for the technology that changes rapidly around us in these recent years, and understanding you are online, you need to be safe online, and what happens when you're not? How do you bring this up with a trusted parent or adult in your life? How do you talk to others? When is something concerning? Helping students have that foundation, and also the understanding that it's really easy for people to say something online that has no backing, and how to fact check those kind of things to prevent further hate based on misinformation. And then the Restorative Justice Committee continues to work on a toolkit for communities to understand how to build restorative justice into their communities before and after hate occurs, creating a toolkit that recognizes that it's always better to prepare for hate before it happens so that you can have those community bonds and you aren't starting from scratch, but recognizing that you don't always get that timing. Sometimes something occurs before you have a chance to lay the foundation for community relations and restorative justice. Sometimes you just have to respond. So recognizing that we want to help communities build this beforehand, but if that's not something that we can do, here's also the steps that you can take after, and then you can circle back. So creating a toolkit where they can start from where they need and then move forward from there. We're also reviewing how we can improve restorative practices in schools. This kind of goes with what the schools committee is working on, recognizing hate, reporting it, and then also encouraging healing amongst students and all of the school community so that faculty and staff can also feel safe going to school and that it is a community of respect for education to occur. Where is there any place that commissioners would like to expand upon? Have I missed anything? I want to take a moment and step back and give the commissioners that are directly involved with these different projects a chance to speak for what I may have missed.
And Jennifer, as we wait for commissioners to give some thought to that, have our newest commissioners been assigned to committees?
Yes, all new commissioners have joined our committee meetings. It's been great to have everybody and bring new ideas and thoughts to this. Thank you all so much, truly. Well, I'm going to move forward, and if somebody comes up with something, please feel free to drop it in the chat, raise your hand, or send an email around later. If you're like, hey, I noticed something we forgot, and I want to make sure this doesn't fall off of our radar while we continue this work.
For question, on the, can you go back a few slides?
Yeah.
I know I'll see it when you. Back one. Back. This proposal right there. Some of you may have seen legislation this session that is attempting to deal with this. I'm just curious, is anyone on this call, their organization supporting the current proposal? I'm just curious.
Katie?
Hi, yeah, the Women's Law Center, we presented testimony on that. We didn't testify in person. I think I had a conflict with another hearing that day, but we did support that.
Well, if anyone else supported, thank you, Katie. Please, add to the chat. This is one that Attorney General Brown feels strongly about. He advocated for a similar proposal in Congress, and we feel strongly that there has to be a way to address this issue while also addressing and protecting the First Amendment rights of officers. So this is something that we definitely want to urge the Law Enforcement Committee to work on, to bring in representatives from law enforcement and other community members to, and of course, we as an OAG will of course help just thread that needle there. But we think that there is a path forward. And I think, Jennifer, had you found that another state had passed a law?
Yes, so Los Angeles County out in California has a law around it, and there was another state, but I can't remember off the top of my head which one.
Okay.
And then
Yeah, is this the Melt Act? I think it's what it's called, or Melt Ice Act, something like that. I do believe that CASA did provide testimony and support, and also had a CASA member provide live testimony and support. So I'm happy to engage on this.
So many acts this session.
I'm going to review that one as well.
Yeah, no, we'll put the bill number in. I don't think this session is likely to move again because these First Amendment concerns come up every year, and it is difficult to ensure you're not, treading on those protections. But I do think, as we've seen other jurisdictions have found a way forward, we can find a way forward as well. So I want to make sure that that is identified as a priority over this next session, because obviously that community members are seeing officers that are associated with extremist hate groups is just another factor that undermines trust, community trust of law enforcement agencies. And so we do think it's critical that we find a way forward to address this. And quite frankly, we don't believe that this is a significant percentage of law enforcement, but even a few members who are associated with these extremist groups can really undermine the trust. So that's a priority. And then there was another recommendation, I think, around restorative practices. We had an opportunity to meet with a law enforcement agency that felt that they had done a good job in putting together restorative justice program in their local schools. So I think, are you talking about later about bringing in some of our outside experts and community members? Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss that opportunity.
No, and that's a great transition to that conversation. So I will make note of that bill number, as well as any other relevant ones about what we've just talked about, so that I can share those in the meeting minutes afterwards. Something that we discussed on our end and then wanted to bring for the commission is recognizing and learning from others. We have a lot of great people in Maryland already doing wonderful work around addressing hate that we can build on, that we can expand on and share with other communities. And then there's also really cool initiatives across the country that are doing work to address hate within their own communities and bringing people in so that we can better develop our recommendations moving forward, and give y'all a chance to ask questions of these experts, of these practitioners, and to further build out our recommendations in the future, because we'll be able to see what different groups are doing. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples that have already come to mind, and then open the floor to further discussion. So before we get to that, though, how these meetings would work. These would be during a virtual meeting on a regular basis. We've talked about either monthly or every other month, likely over a lunch hour, much like a commission meeting. They would be completely recorded for future use. So it would not be quite a full commission meeting. It would be a learning experience, but it would also be a chance to record it, and so that everybody has access to it later. And all commissioners, of course, are invited, and it will relate to the goals that we are talking about in some way in addressing hate. So some of the ideas. First is government officials highlighting the work that we're already doing across Maryland. We know that there's local human rights and human relations agencies that are doing really cool work that we could hear from as in educating the public and supporting victims of hate. There's also many schools that are already doing wonderful work, as well as law enforcement agencies, asking how different agencies connect with the communities that they serve, listening to what they found effective in reporting and addressing hate. And any of the above could be combined to have this conversation, because many of these groups already work together. They do a lot of work that intersects, and they recognize that, and being able to hear how they build those networks to address hate within their communities, within Maryland already. But it's not just Maryland that's doing really great work. There's other states out there that we could invite, since this is a virtual setup, to have these conversations. How do they address hate bias incidents? Maryland, while one of few states that recognizes hate bias incidents and takes data on that to try to support victims of hate bias, we're not the only ones. What are other states doing? How are they doing it differently? How have those efforts addressed hate in their states? What are they seeing? Oregon is a great example of a state that is another state that does this. What have they found most useful in their own efforts? Inviting them in to have that conversation and see where we can learn from each other, and how we can make that work for Marylanders. There's also the academics and experts. There's a lot of people that study hate and hate-related issues. We could bring in researchers to ask what they're seeing as effective ways to address hate. This would be a great chance to talk with public health professionals about how their approaches to public health could be used and modified to address hate. Treating hate as a public health issue would make a lot of sense. It has a huge impact, at the very least, on an individual's mental health and a community's health. But also, if we're talking about hate crimes, we're talking often about physical health and well-being as well. And then we could also hear from experts in developing areas that impact hate, like generative artificial intelligence. This is a rapidly changing field. We need to understand what we're looking at, how people see it being used for hate, and what are some of the practices that folks are seeing that are good for helping address that. Are there uses for it that we're not thinking of? What is going on with this technology that we may not be aware of that experts are already seeing? And then also community groups and organizers. There's a lot of great community groups that are doing that have efforts to address hate. What are they doing? How do these different community groups work together to build bridges between each other? What de-radicalization efforts already exist and how could those be supported? What gaps do they see in current systems that the commission could improve on? And then also we recognize that other organizations that are not state agencies take reports. Are they willing to talk more about it? What trends are they seeing that's not included in our official reports? How can we use that information to better our own official reporting mechanisms, either in response, in building community so that those reports are actually taken, so that people are making those reports? How do we build that trust so that our official data mirrors what they're seeing within their communities as groups and organizers? And I'm sure there are other things that we could invite people to speak on. Are there skills that we want to build on that would be really useful in understanding and making recommendations? We could invite people to talk about how you train the trainers so that we can have individuals throughout the state that are ready to go out and help others be prepared to address hate. And I'm sure there's many more subjects that we could address. So on that note, I'm going to open it up for discussions and questions, and I'm going to leave this up for a minute so that if folks want me to go back a slide or two, I can do that. But I want to open this up for conversation about what you all think would be really useful to invite folks to speak about.
Thank you, Jennifer. One group that occurred to me are other grant recipients of the DOJ hate grants, and I think there were at least at one point there were three. And while the federal government is no longer providing training assistance to grant recipients, I wonder. I know at one point online you could see the recipients of the grants for different years, and so. And I know they've connected us to some in the past. And so they would probably be a good resource to look through and see who are doing projects similar to us and reach out and see if they might come and talk to us about their work.
Asha.
I'm unmuting and opening my camera. Hello, everyone. I just have to say, I think that this is wonderful. I love, love, love the idea of these affinity group meetings. I think that they will be extremely productive. I can envision getting a good feel for what's happening in each of these areas around the state, and also getting lots of best practices and ideas. I think for practitioners, it becomes hard. You feel like you're always sort of, there are some things that you can lean on that are tried and tested and true, right? But I do think that hearing about things that other people are doing that have been effective is just such a game changer, because so many of us are scrambling for time, resources. So the efficiencies that I think it would create are just amazing. I think this sounds wonderful. And kudos on a bright and happy presentation about a very dark and sad topic.
Thank you. I'm always a fan of bright colors. Bishop Abrams.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I think that, again, this is a wonderful idea. I just wanted to ask, and I'm not sure if it's an area that has been considered, but we talk about people coming in to talk about their research and what they have learned, is there anyone that has considered how hate is, I guess we can say, is people say it's supported by their religious belief? And so have we looked at anybody coming into, just bring that out to us and share information with us about that? Because I have recognized that people feel like it's okay because they feel like the Bible supports what they're doing, and so this is just my personal lived experience. So I'm just wondering, if we can consider that, or have we considered that, or if anybody out there is talking about that. Thank you.
I'll respond to that and say, certainly that issue has come up before this commission before, and a previous iteration of this commission, we did bring an organization in, not for the purpose of challenging anyone's religious beliefs, but really facilitating discussions amongst commissioners. And how do you talk to someone about hate when they may associate a particular position or belief that certain communities deem hateful or discriminatory, or interpret as threatening their safety, or you can, a host of different emotions and responses, but that sort of fall within potentially hate activity or hate language. How do you have conversations across different religious groups and other communities that are associated with certain beliefs? And so we did have a group come in and help us facilitate those types of conversations. I will say those are very difficult conversations. And certainly the intent and the outcome is almost never to convince someone that their religious beliefs are improper, inappropriate, unreasonable, etc. But it is to find ways to, because you may find that you have a lot that you actually either have in common or share commitment to fighting hate activity broadly with individuals in different groups. And so there may just be one area with which there's tension, but there are many other areas in which there is alignment. And how do you work side by side with someone who may have a belief that is in significant tension to your own beliefs, united to this broader effort of combating hate? So we'll look and see where we might be able to revisit that with commissioners in terms of bring that group in. It was a facilitated conversation to help us as you all, as we host individuals in, as we work together as a diverse community, and as you go out into your respective communities, working across different, with people with different beliefs, it may be helpful to have those tools to be able to employ those so that to, improve the chance for successful outcome in those conversations. So thank you for bringing that to the table. We certainly can revisit that now that we have a whole new group of commissioners who have been appointed to do this work.
Yeah. It also brings to mind, before I get to Adelia, Anne Arundel County did a great panel recently about how religious communities, it was part of a 2-day event of addressing hate in their own county. They had a panel that was really good about how religious communities address hate directed towards them, but there was always also a great conversation going on of how different religious groups and congregations had addressed past hate and how they've addressed hate within their own congregations, which might be useful to hear from as well. So, Adelia.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Adila, and I am with the Community Engagement Committee. The one thing that I very strongly believe in is if somebody's already done great work, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So this was such a great idea. Everybody's short on time. So if there are best practices out there, whether it is somebody in Maryland or whether it's somebody in a different state where they have done something already and it's worked for them and we can learn from them, that already gives us a head start in terms of starting. And I know we've done that with some of our resource tree where we've gone and looked at other states. Thank you, Jennifer, for finding them. But if there are efficiencies out there, absolutely need to learn from them. On that thought, one of the things that I have really missed is I could not attend some of those previous events that we were doing. I know there's one coming up, but for the new commissioners as well, they've missed out on those opportunities. And I know it's a nightmare to record them, so that's why we might not be able to do that. However, one of the requests was, again, if we have this new event happening in May, if there's a way to record just the learning piece of it, not the Q&A, but just record that, even if it is on the phone recording, that could be shared in some resource on Teams with new commissioners as they're coming up. And then the second idea was that if some of those people have best practices that they would like to share, again, we could invite them to come and talk to us online, where we can directly interact with them and ask questions. Their presentation is ready. They already are expert at whatever they're talking about. So it just gives them an opportunity to get a broader audience. So I just wanted to share that.
Very helpful. And one of the ideas we were discussing once we complete the last in-person forum is whether we could pull together sort of like the best of the best presentations and do an entirely virtual forum that could be recorded and that could live on and be a resource, longer term for those community members who, I mean, look, let's face it, we are now in a situation where in certain communities, you cannot get people to come to an in-person event because they're just concerned that it could be a target. They could be targeted. And so we know that, and then you have, of course, conflicts, and we're often working around conflicts with other important community events. And so we know that everybody can't make every single one, and we have only been to each community, once. So it's a fair point, and one that we hope will be alleviated, at least in part, by doing an online virtual forum that is recorded. So no, and in terms of like identifying people who are already doing great work, we really are looking to all of you in terms of your community members, within your own organizations. If you have experts, other organizations that you work with, your local law enforcement, wherever you see partnerships and partners and those who you, are doing really great things and seeing, particularly if they're seeing results, let Jennifer know so we can have just a running list of experts, because we have a pretty broad mandate, and you all have done a great job in developing these subject area specific committees that we can really, sort of focus on these different areas. But within all of that, I imagine we'll be able to come up with quite a nice long list of experts and those who are in the community doing the work and seeing success. One resource, OAG started in this work, I would say, around 2019. I had an opportunity to go to a training for state attorneys generals. I think it was a NAGTRI, National Association of Attorney Generals training in California around state AG response to hate activity. And one of the most powerful presenters that they brought on was a former white supremacist who talked about how he had been sort of targeted, was at a very vulnerable place in his life at the time, and really groomed into hate, and the experience he had that awakened him to how that lifestyle was not one that he wanted to continue down, and sort of how he then changed his path and now led a very different life, but one that had him speaking before communities that were committed to eradicating hate and really saying, like, this is what you're up against. This is how folks are groomed in this. And of course, this is more on the extremist side, but boy, is it enlightening. One, because it lessens the divide between those of us who are committed to doing the work and those who we see on the other side as perpetrators, right? Where there's humanity in everyone. At least that's the hope and the belief. And how do we ultimately, particularly when you think about restorative practices, how do we reach into people and connect with them and explain the pain that certain language and actions cause, and a better path forward. So I don't know how we track down individuals, but I imagine that there are some organizations who may be have like a group of folks who have been on the other side, or even individuals who have committed hate crimes, who are now, I don't want to say reformed, but are able to talk about the lessons that they learned in those activities and what they think they wish they had known, and what they think would be helpful in terms of helping to prevent other people from engaging in that activity. So I want us to add a category there, because I do think it's helpful to hear from, a broad range of folks in this area.
There was a similar presentation at Eradicate Hate, Sunita, that I agree was very powerful.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. That's fantastic. All right. Well, look at that. Then we already have some colleagues who may be able to point us to some individuals. That's great. Louise?
I'm just gonna add a +1 to that as well. I used to, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Louise Flanahan. I support Jennifer's work on this. I'm the director of policy within the Office of Equity Policy and Engagement. Very minimally, I should say. Jennifer really does run the show here. But that the idea of the formers, they often call them in the countering violent extremism space. I used to work within that space a decade ago, and was at kind of the burgeoning end of sort of bringing public health practices into countering violent extremism. And thinking about it in those terms, and the studies show, like, almost unequivocally, that a former speaking to current people who currently hold those ideologies is the single most effective way of de-radicalizing individuals, although there are multiple ways that you can bring people back on that de-radicalization pathway. And the gentleman who runs it at DHS are within my network because of that work. I don't know if they're still at DHS, given the givens about this current administration. They hold very different sort of beliefs and ideologies in terms of the best pathways forward. But I just looked them up on LinkedIn, and they're based in LA, which is interesting given, as Jennifer mentioned, the kind of approaches that they're taking in policing and preventing gang violence in police and those types of things. So I would be happy to reach out to them as well. I'm sure that they have networks of formers, and then they could also just come and talk about, they've had a decade of experience with this approach and these practices. So to many of the points that other people have raised, we could kind of see what makes sense in our context from their best practices.
No, that's great, Louise. Thank you. And so as you all think about who you might know and want to recommend, if you could start sharing those names and any contact information with Jennifer, we'll build a list. And as she mentioned, begin to build out a schedule. And that way we invite all of you who are interested, so they're not just sort of siloed in our respective committees, but that everyone can attend and learn and ask questions. And in terms of the information that's gleaned, certainly the committee that is most relevant, that work is that conversation is most relevant to, can begin to do that work. But I hope you all know that all committees are open to all of you. They're open to the public. And so if you have a conversation that is really intriguing, inspiring, and you want to continue to do that work, and it just happens to land in a committee that you don't belong to, please feel free to also attend the other committee and to keep engaged in that particular initiative, developing that initiative. But we really, A.G. Brown has really tasked us with digging in and digesting the data, talking to experts, and coming up with a robust set of recommendations for policymakers, and specifically for schools, which we haven't really spoken to in a substantive way yet. And so, and that is part of our mandate, to develop recommendations both for the General Assembly and the Department of Education. So we have a pretty challenging mandate, but these are challenging times. And I think I'm fully confident that we will rise to the charge, and just again appreciate all of your work and attention to date on this. Was there any other area that we wanted to cover, Jennifer? I know we were in the general discussion part of the agenda.
think that's all I have. Unless folks have questions, comments, ideas. And as such, I'm also still always available via email. Happy to hear from folks anytime and have a conversation, either through email, through a phone call, whatever works well for y'all. That's what I'm here for. And yeah.
Hey, Jennifer, it's Greg Phillips from MCAC. I know in our subcommittee the other day, you mentioned the next forum would be May 1st and 16th. Could you shoot out the location and times for that?
Absolutely. I can include that in the follow-up email to this meeting that and just for general information, we will be at the Centerville branch for at the Queen Anne's County Public Library on May 16th for the public day. I'll include the registration link for that. The law enforcement day will be May 1st. So we're really excited to do that forum and then have reached every area of the state.
Thank you, ma'am.
Adelia.
Just one quick question, since is Greg Phillips the MCAC person that we're trying to set up a meeting with for that's different?
That would be Zach.
Okay.
And I will follow up on that. Yeah.
I'm like, Jimmy's here. I can ask.
No, totally fair. I've been in conversation with Zach. I actually owe the committee an email on that front. Thank you for that reminder.
No, but we can, once we have that, I would like to open it up to the rest of the commission as well, because people might have questions about it. I would consider that a subject matter expert as he comes and talks. And so in case people have questions, that's an opportunity.
Yes. And I think part of that also is respecting on the MCAC side, recognizing that for public presentations, that's a different conversation. But I also think it'd be great to hear from MCAC regularly when their annual report comes out, if they would be willing to talk more about it, because that annual report is very useful for my work personally.
It is
greatly appreciated, but that is a further conversation to be had.
And speaking of experts who are represented on the commission, you know, as I look at the organizations that are represented, some of you serve very specific constituencies. You know, it may be that, you know, we ask you to come and present to the commission about what you're hearing from your communities in terms of hate activity. Obviously, those of you who represent immigrant populations, I imagine that you are experiencing, but across the board, we want to hear from you all as well, and you or someone in your organization may very well have information that it would be helpful for the commission to hear, particularly because we know the significant underreporting that comes up throughout law enforcement agencies. And a lot of folks come directly to communities, organizations that are in their communities that they trust. The other, in addition to MCAC, the other state organization that I think it would be great to hear from is the Center for School Safety, as we think about strategies for responding to certain activity within the schools and looking for different approaches. I think the Center for School Safety can talk about what they're seeing and how they're training SROs and other officers who are in school about how to deal with certain hate activity. I think that would be helpful. So Kate, and just putting a little bug in your ear on that one.
Yes, and you know we're always happy to do that.
Yes. So unless there are any other comments, questions, suggestions, as Jennifer said, if ideas come to you after we adjourn today, please don't hesitate to reach out. In terms of next steps, she will be reminding you all of the request to identify a list of experts and to make sure that you all, as the committee chairs, have established, or I think, what is the frequency? Most committees are meeting monthly, Jennifer, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. To be meeting at least monthly, recognizing that we really are trying to ramp up our information gathering and our development of substantive recommendations for our next annual report. I think that It has taken us a little bit to get our feet under us in terms of when the General Assembly reconstituted this body and required appointments, some of the appointments to go through Senate approval. But now that I feel that we are really at a good place in terms of our appointments, our composition, we can really dig in this year. And I think the times call upon us to do so. And so I'll be checking in certainly with Jennifer and you all as the months progress, and helping to identify experts as well, and attending some of the meeting to help you all brainstorm. So that's a lot to look forward to. If there are any other sort of requests from the commissioners, we'll make sure to put those in the follow-up email. But again, thank you all for your time here today and for your commitment to the work as we move forward. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, everyone.